All right, three, two, one. Before we get into today's episode, I want to remind you, if you like the episode, give it a like. And if you really like it, subscribe. Let's dive in. Ever since I've moved to New York City, time often seems to move at 10x the rate compared to back in Denver. And one of the biggest challenges I face is being able to make time for all of the interesting creatives that I want to meet. Today, I finally made the time to sit down and talk with Charles Etoroma Jr. You may have read his work on Hypebeast or Complex. You may have seen his digital reinterpretations of footwear on Instagram. Regardless, Charles is someone I've been eager to have a conversation with for a while. So, Charles, how are you doing today, sir?
Doing well. I try not to be in the business of complaining, so always doing well. Another day is another opportunity to just make stuff happen. So,
For sure. I know you've been busy. I know New York City. I feel how busy it is. I've been here for 2 months. I can only imagine what the last. I don't know how long you've been here, but just everything has been probably busy for you.
yeah. Been here coming up 4 years next year.
Wow.
It has been a whirlwind of a 4 years, but all heading and trending in the right direction. So, very
Fantastic.
thankful for the city.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Just to give the listener some background on how we kind of cross paths. A couple weeks ago, I think it was, yeah, early October. So almost, well, that's a month now.
Yeah.
See, I don't even know how time has flown by like the way it has,
Mhm.
man. It's been a month already. That's crazy.
Yeah.
So I had a friend, a Dutch friend of mine, and he seems to be a friend of yours too, or you guys have talked before. Teun or Toon, I call him Teun for just jokes, but Toon Vandermeer. He is someone who's been on the podcast before. If you guys have remembered Toon, when I visited Amsterdam, Toon was the one who was kind of like a local guide, told me about different places I should visit, whatever. He came to visit me in New York. And, some of the days he was here, like I was working, I was with my girlfriend doing other things. Toon went to go visit Charles, and Charles is someone that obviously like connects, or Toon is someone that connects Charles and I, and it's cool to be able to um have a friend of a friend, you know what I mean? Have someone who connects us like that. Charles and I, we both met at the Timberland event for the first time a couple of weeks ago. This is not a boot, the documentary, and
Yeah.
we've been trying to plan to do things. I know you went to Colorado for a bit,
Yeah.
and you're back now working very hard, very diligently. Can I talk? And now I'm doing the same thing. So it's been busy, and I'm just glad we had the opportunity to, like I said, sit down, chat, get this thing going.
Yeah.
Enough of me talking. Let's break into the first question, man. I love starting the podcast out with just getting to know who I'm talking to. The audience gets to know, I get to know better. And I think there's no better place to start than childhood, because I feel like childhood is the beginning or the precipice to kind of how your adult life is going to form itself, right? For lack of better words. But so, Charles, talk to me. Where are you from, man? And what was it like for you growing up as a kid?
Yeah, I'm originally born and raised in Raleigh, North Carolina. So Southern kid, but parents immigrated here from Nigeria, both of them. And then they had me. They both moved. My dad moved to actually North Carolina pretty quickly,
Mm,
by way of New York for a bit, and then my mom moved to Virginia, and then to North Carolina. They met in North Carolina, had my brother and I.
mm,
And so I was there most of my life. I think around the age 27, 28 is when I finally moved out of North Carolina, which I never thought I was going to do, but I think it was
yeah.
the best move that I could have ever made. Growing up for me was great, actually. I mean, I think I look back now and I realize how like healthy my family was, like in a lot of ways that I took for granted as a
Mm,
kid. Um, I think any first gen kid can relate to like having a very strict household and like them wanting you to succeed so badly that they kind of put a lot of these safeguards in place because they've had to sacrifice a lot. So their expectation for you is very high. I was very much a product of that. And
mm,
and not everything was perfect, not everything was easy, and we weren't rich by any means, but my parents, my dad, who is my hero for sure, did a fantastic job of like helping us along the way. Like he did everything for us. I don't know how he found the resources sometimes to do what he did, but like anything that we needed, he found a way to get. He found a way to support. Same with moms as well. Like
mm.
Still great relationship with my family. So I don't know, I owe a lot to them. Brought up, I guess being Nigerian, there's a couple different paths that you can take. And if you don't take them, you find yourself in a different conversation. So being a doctor, an engineer, lawyer, are kind of the three typical paths. And I think their expectation for me was to be a lawyer or an engineer or a lawyer,
Mm.
and I turned out to be neither. But that's that's it's all kind of the ship has righted itself
We'll
to.
we'll get into that a little bit. We'll get into that a little bit. It seems it's awesome that your family has had such a positive impact on your life because for a lot of people, your family can be a detriment, or it can be something that just limits your belief about the future for yourself. And I know that, there's a certain level of, I mean, we can call it what it is, privilege that anyone has, that if they have two parents, if they have parents who care for them, if they have parents who obviously are looking out for their betterment, that's a fantastic, I love hearing it because like it shows that there's a glimmer of hope in the world. And there are people out there who have had experiences that are positive, even with all the negativity that's in the news and that seems to be perpetuating in the culture, whether it be online news and things like that. So I love that. And it's I've had a lot of guests on the show, and of all of the guests that I have, obviously I interview a lot of people who I consider to be successful. So there's a lot of like good feeling stories, but a lot of the immigrant families, a lot of the immigrant, like sons of immigrants or daughters of immigrants, those individuals have a totally different perspective than some of the people who maybe if they immigrated, if their family immigrated, it's generations past, right? Or they don't necessarily have that same thing. Like myself, like I know my family was generations of slaves obviously being born, and I mean I don't know when they immigrated, you know what I'm saying? So there's no like, oh, my family came from this part of the world to come to the United States. No, we were here. We were just represented differently, right? So that's good to hear, man, that your family had such a strong. Do you have any like I want to ask, do you have any like particular memories where like you look back on your childhood and you're like, damn, like I have really fond memories of this time or like this moment, whether it's like at the dinner table or watching
Mm.
something, or is there anything like that that sticks out to you that you want to, like, you could share? I don't know.
Yeah, that's interesting. There. I feel like there's a few. And I'll talk about maybe a couple really quick, but the one that sticks out to me the most because I just recently said this to someone was I can't remember what Christmas it was. I don't remember how old I was, but it was when the Nintendo 64 had just made the like see-through green edition,
Mm,
and I think it was in partnership with Donkey Kong or something or other. So anyway, that was like the one thing that I wanted for Christmas, and I wasn't sure if I was going to get it. And open up the Christmas present, and it's the Nintendo 64 see-through green. I get Donkey Kong, Mario Super or
the excitement.
N64, and the level of like joy and pure excitement. I think that's definitely a top 10 moment for me. Like that one I remember very, very clearly because that was, I don't know, there's just something special about that time for me. I think another moment that kind of sticks out to me is I guess not really a positive one in what happened, but I think it just kind of speaks to just the family orientation in general. But like
Mm,
I remember playing with my younger brother and we were jumping on it. We had a bunk bed at the time and he jumped and like misjumped or like jumped too high and like hit his head and cracked something in his head.
jeez.
And we had to like rush him to the hospital. And that was a wild moment. But I think for me, like my brother and I have always been close. We've never gotten into a real hard disagreement. And I just remember being so devastated, but so supportive of like, what do we need to do to like help him?
Mm,
Like, let's do whatever we need to do to get him okay. And I think that's something that's kind of stuck between us. Like, he has my back 100%. I have his 100%. And
yeah.
um, yeah, I think that, and also growing up in the church, I guess,
Yeah.
uh, for better sense, black church in a way, it's got its own kind of connotation and
Yeah.
stigmas and all of this stuff. But I think for me that those moments have definitely shaped me in positive ways. I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. I love hearing that, man. It's good. It's refreshing to hear like a just a good story. Like a lot of people, a lot of people want to know about like how'd you go from the trenches, now you're at the skyscraper, right? And obviously there's a growth that still happens. Everyone has to be a kid, deal with bullying, deal with being picked on, deal with trying to figure out who you're going to be as a human
Yeah.
being.
Yeah.
But it's that's really refreshing to hear you talk about. Sorry, I got some crazy sirens going on. That's New York City. I don't know if the microphone is even picking that up,
Oh
but
no, I can't hear it at all.
okay. Well, that's why I got good mics. No, it's good. I kind of want to also ask you, you mentioned Nintendo, you mentioned time with your brother. For you, like, and we talked about this in DM a little bit. Maybe this is like a bit of a side interest, but like, is there anything like from an early age that interested you as a kid that, maybe you took with yourself to how you were like you're gonna live your life professionally? Were there any interests that you had as a kid that kind of that lended itself to your more professional side?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and one that I've been thinking a lot more about the older I get. Because I think the older you get, the more you realize, and the more you look back to realize where you've been and where you're hopefully going. I think there's a couple things. One, I was very skilled at sketching, and I
Mm,
never had any classic training, never had any. I don't know. It was just something I did. And so that was one, but also within drawing, sketching, I would make these like, I guess like mazes in a way where I would like connect dots. I would like take a blank piece of paper and just draw many dots all across the paper and just like connect them
mm,
in interesting ways and build really intricate patterns. And I did that just for fun.
mm.
And I don't know why I did that. I don't know why I started doing it. But that was something that happened. And then I think it led into just like like trace sketching, like comics, or trying to learn like how to draw comic book characters and like manga art, like all those things I think stemmed off of this like very early on, like just love of sketching.
Yeah.
So I think that's one. The other thing that I remember is like, I don't know, being again going back to being an immigrant kid, like I feel like a lot of people relate to this. Like when you're in conversation sometime, or when you're like your parents are trying to do something or say something, it's like they have their way of saying it, which is like the more foreign way of doing it or saying something, and then you're living in America, which is like a US place, and
Mm,
how they say it isn't necessarily how you're supposed to say it. And so trying to be that bridge and that gap of that like language gap, I guess, for them in some ways, or like trying to
yeah.
help them connect certain language or certain elements of things, was always something that I was trying to do. And I think that helped me really develop the written and like colloquial level of what I
Mm,
do, which is an interesting kind of thing that I've realized looking back at it. Because I, number one, I had to do that, but number two, I hated when they sounded like Nigerian or African, which is like crazy now. Like I love it, but as a kid, like you don't want to stand out. It's like, what do I need to do to make them sound less like they are? And so that paying attention to words, how you say things, was something that just I don't know, I picked up really quickly because I didn't want to be embarrassed.
yeah, that's really interesting you say that because you're so right. Every group within America, every region in America has different language, has different lexicon, right? And
Mm-hmm.
from youth culture to being a 20 in your 20s to being in your 30s, 40s, I mean, you still see it like there's so many different layers to it, right? Everyone has a different vernacular that's being
Yep.
spoken. And so it makes sense. And I'm also someone who I pay attention to those things because it is very interesting, right? Like how kids in California, black kids in California talk versus black kids in Utah versus black kids
Mm-hmm.
in Alabama versus black kids in Nebraska or something like that. Everyone has a very subtly different lexicon vernacular that they speak, a different twang to how they talk. And
Mm-hmm.
not just blacks. We could talk about women. We could talk about Latinx. Every group has a different from age down to creed, right?
Yep.
And so it makes a lot of sense. And uh, I mean, it's fun. It's fun to kind of evaluate these things as a young person, especially when it's so in your face with your
Yeah,
parents
for sure.
also having their own version of things. And dialect is something that like even on YouTube, I don't know if you've seen these kind of videos where they have like a group of people. There's like one from Canada, one from Australia, one from New Zealand, one from England, one from the US. and they basically asked them like, how do you order a McDonald's cheeseburger like back home? And
Right.
every person says it in English, obviously, but they say it in such a different way that it's just unique, and it's fun to kind of to study and think about.
For sure. For
And with drawing, with sketching, like that's a no-brainer. Obviously, that like scratches a creative itch that once you start scratching, it's like you got the infinite mosquito bite on your arm. Like you're always
sure.
scratching it, always scratching it.
Yep. Yeah.
So it seems like you definitely had like a creative kind of like you were pretty self-aware about some of the things going on in your life. But how does that, because you talked about in the beginning, you mentioned it a little bit, how you then, or I looked online too, you went online, you went to study mechanical engineering, but it's not really where you ended up, what you ended up at. So kind of like
Mhm.
walk us through the creative Charles to the
Yeah.
obviously Nigerian parents telling you to be practical, and then how you got to where you are now as a content strategist, writer, storyteller, designer,
Yeah.
sneakers, fashion, everything that is you. Because I feel like you have a lot of
Yeah.
folders in your
Yeah.
bin.
For sure. Yeah, as a kid, I think practicality comes first, because you just, I mean, at least for me, I felt like I had a responsibility. Number one, being the older kid, and parents literally having moved so that you could have a better life. That like I just had to do what they wanted me to do to fulfill kind of this ask. So along the way, I guess high school was a big kind of moment for me, and I know people have several people like don't look back fondly on their high school years. I think I had a fairly good high school experience. I mean, obviously there were moments that weren't great, but one really pivot. Well, even before that, I guess. So elementary school and then high school, I had two teachers that were. Well, I had a lot of teachers that were great, but two teachers in particular, both within the English side of the subject kind of whatever subject
Mm,
line,
mm,
and they both challenged me. One teacher in elementary school, like she really, Mrs. Farmer, still remember her to this day. She like grilled me in terms of grammar, and I write and I speak and I like am the way that I am because of the training that she gave me.
mm.
So her and then another teacher that I had, I can't remember her name, in high school, got me really into creative writing. So I learned how to write poetry, short stories, um, just like creative writing in general, just to think outside of what you've been told or what you've read and try to come up with things yourself. So those two teachers really helped me, and I didn't realize it at the time. But anyway, I graduate high school, go on to college. I am trying to do engineering, and it's a funny story because I was actually trying to do biomedical engineering,
Mm,
and at NC State, which is where I went, biomedical engineering was it was kind of like a department within a department, and so there was a separate application process that had to kind of go into it. I applied, and somehow they lost or messed up my application, and so yeah, still don't know what happened there
hmm.
exactly. And
That's weird.
they were like, "It's okay, like just reapply, you'll get in." And I missed the application like deadline, and so I couldn't apply to get in. And I was like, "Oh, what am I supposed to do? Like, I'm already like a year in. Like, what is left?" And so I just
Oh
kind of
my
picked
goodness.
mechanical, thinking that it was similar to biomedical, which it is not at all, not even close. And I think that was the moment. I remember sophomore year after the first semester, I was like, this is not it. Like I'm not this. I'm not. I don't like this. And I think that's what began a really interesting self discovery journey of like, okay, let me just do this. But I know that ultimately this is not something that I'm really passionate about. It's not something that I'm really interested in. I can do it, but I don't think I want to. And during that time, I was doing a little bit of writing, kind of, but just more so for myself. And I got involved in entrepreneurship. Like that was the first time that I had heard about that word or like what an entrepreneur was. A friend of mine invited me to uh like I think it was hear someone speak, and then it was run by this club that was really involved in entrepreneurship called the Entrepreneurship Initiative, which is like a big program now at NC State.
Mm,
And through that, I was like, oh, wow, there's a world bigger than work. There's a world bigger than going to school and like studying classes and being an engineer. And so I got really into entrepreneurship. And then, fast forward, I'm going through college, learning more about entrepreneurship, learning more about people who are doing things. for North Carolina, for their community, or for whatever they're passionate about. And a friend of mine was like, I'm writing for this place that covers entrepreneurs and like startup companies within Raleigh. Would you be interested? I can't write these next couple articles because I'm gonna be out or whatever. And I was like, yeah, sure, I'll write one or two, like no problem. Um, Turns out I was there for a couple like 2 years. Ended up writing consistently for them, covering entrepreneurship, covering startups within North Carolina, and that's what married kind of like two worlds for me: entrepreneurship, which was what I was learning about, and then writing, which is something that I had already kind of built the skill set around, which I wasn't aware of. And
Right.
those two worlds collided, and that's kind of what set me off in like this idea of storytelling and like building ideas through written word. My junior year, a really impactful trip was taken, again sponsored by the entrepreneurship, where a select group of kids got to go to California. And this is the first time, mind you, I'm in college. This is the first time that I had been on a plane. This is
Mm.
really the first major time I had been to the West Coast. I'd never been before that. And so the trip was to go to San Francisco to be able to talk with VCs, funds, tour places like Apple, Google, Facebook, talk
Wow.
with people there who were alumni of North Carolina State, to just get their perspective on life and like how they got into their world, how they got into their craft. And for me, I once I got back from that trip, I was never the same person.
Change, man. Yeah.
Changed. I could not see North Carolina the same. I could not see work the same. I could not see school the same.
Mm.
So I think that was a very impactful thing for me. So then fast forward, one of the startup companies that I ended up covering for while I was doing this writing ended up hiring me after I graduated college, and I had the decision of turning down a great engineering job that I had lined up because I had done some internships while I was in school, to making no money basically and working for this startup that ultimately failed. And I
Yeah.
chose the latter, but I think it was what set me off in the course that I went into.
Gotcha, gotcha. And there's a lot to unpack there, man. There's a lot to unpack there. It's the Spark Notes version of your life, and I know that we could probably, if we needed to, get into the minutia for about 3 hours here. But there's a couple things that I want clarified too. So it seems like you were juggling both, still doing engineering and entrepreneurship at the same time, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and so I mean, that's literally a fork in the road. Like, were you I mean, yeah, there's a lot. Talk to us about like that decision. Did you talk to your parents about it beforehand? Did you just make the decision? Were you afraid? Like talk us through the emotions of the decision. Like this is the LeBron James the moment.
yeah. This was the moment for sure. And my and again, this goes for a lot of Nigerian kind of people and the culture in general, like because there's a very specific subset of things that you're supposed to do. I realized very early on, and I was the kid that was kind of like, I don't want to say hard-headed, but I was the one that liked to push the barrier.
Mm,
um, and that was something I was born with. I was not given that. It's just like I would, wherever I could, I would try to find where the line was so that I knew. And in doing that, I did get trouble quite often, but in getting in trouble, I realized that proof of concept was really important. So if I was going to do something that I knew wasn't going to be or like accepted early on, I was going to have to show that this thing could work. So one of the things that I did, I guess, I mean, after sophomore year or around sophomore year, was start a t-shirt company called Aspire.
yeah.
The name was Latin. I don't know why I chose it. I think it means to inspire, to believe in. And I wanted to prove, number one, to myself, but also to them, that I could do something bigger or different than just follow this like predestined path.
Mm,
Um, and through that, I taught myself how to like sew. I taught myself how to screen print, how to do a little bit of graphic design. And so that was like a little bit of an incubator for myself
mm,
while in school, of like how to start something, what it takes to market, what it takes to find an audience, like how to build a quote unquote brand, even though it never became
mm.
real. Um, Still, it was a very good masterclass in terms of like how to build something. And I only needed it to be a proof of concept
Yep.
for them. And then it eventually evolved into, and this is like where it becomes more about the writing aspect of things. Later on, more so around senior year, the idea really kind of morphed from selling t-shirts with like inspirational messages, and it had a couple different versions, but ultimately landed in terms of this thing of like interviewing really cool creatives who were
Mm,
doing things that I thought were really cool at the time, and getting their take on like how they did it. And so
right.
I would like find people on Instagram and be like, "Hey, love your work. Would love to interview you for this like thing that I've started. Would you be interested?" And people wrote back they were interested. So like a ton of interviews of like really interesting people, and
Wow.
I learned about their process, their creativity, like what it took to do what they did. And I think again that was an incubator for me in terms of learning how to do what I do now.
I love that, man. There's like a lot of things that kind of like tick off the box that you're an intelligent dude here. The first one is the fact that uh there's a difference between obviously taking entrepreneurship classes and being an entrepreneur. And even accidentally, I don't know if you did this on purpose, but accidentally, on purpose, whatever it is, you at least try to apply the knowledge that you gained, right? And I think for a lot of people, they always ask this question, you know, they always DM me or they'll DM other people and they say, Drew, is it necessary to go to school to be a marketer, to do marketing, to go to school to do this, to be this? And the question is very complicated because, I mean, the answer is very complicated, excuse me, because it could be yes for you and it could be no for another person, depending on how well you apply yourself
Yeah.
in a particular subject matter. Right. And so, you know, it's important to obviously always be learning, which it seems like you understand the value of knowledge, not just education, but like the pursuit of knowledge. Right. And so that's why you did what you did when you were in school. You chased the things and you had to have that proof of concept in order to showcase to people that you were serious about what you were doing, right? And that's what Aspire was. And I wanted to ask about that, but you answered it pretty flawlessly. All right. And obviously it seems like you also had passion for what you were doing as well. Like there were things that you just felt inside of you that this is the right decision for me,
Yeah.
barring any kind of maybe initial negative repercussions from my family or from the opinions of others.
Mhm.
And then another thing, I just reminded myself, I had to drag that out a little bit to remind myself. Another thing is that, and this is like always been one of my secret weapons, like secret, like tips, hacks, whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
is interviewing people. If you are nice enough or not nice enough, or if you are smart enough to recognize that people, if you flatter them, if you bring them onto your platform and say, hey, I want to learn from you, you're the expert, teach me something, they will give you all of their secrets. And what you can do is you can take them and you can apply them to whatever you do. Right. And so it's something that I tell it on the podcast only because I know that this audience is more focused on getting a more intimate relationship with myself and from people like you who are whoever I'm bringing on, people like you. And so it's just something like if you're young, old, you know, however, whatever your age is, it's invaluable. And obviously, like you don't want to just do things to get something in return.
Right.
You're still curious about them as an individual, but like oh man, the probably the amount of stuff that you learned from interviewing people,
Mm.
like in just stepping into those conversations and having and building connections off of those interviews is probably unbelievable, right?
Yeah, it's been wild, and I think you alluded to something too, like going back, and you can you these are things you can learn, but I think I personally was gifted them the level of curiosity. Like that is an important, but that is a superpower for life. Like if you are curious and hungry to actually gain knowledge, gain an understanding, that will take you far. That will build your drive. That will build your connections. That will point you in the right direction. And then also reading. Like I love
Mm,
and that was something that I was gifted. Not everyone loves reading, and that's okay. I think
yeah.
you can gain knowledge a lot of different ways. But for me, reading has been instrumental in terms of learning, gaining wisdom, gaining understanding to things that I probably had no business being a part of or understanding. So those two things I just wanted to shout out.
Yeah, for sure. For sure, for sure, for sure. And yeah, I mean we can go on and on and on, but you're 1,000% right. I love both of those things as well. Kind of talking more about your journey again. So you decided you have this fork in the road. You decide on taking the non-engineering path, right?
Mhm.
You go towards more of the entrepreneurial, creative VC side of things. It seems like, um, I guess I mean, careers are long, careers changed, especially in nowadays. Everyone's only at a company for a year or 6 months.
Yeah.
In my head, I have a totally different perception of you than probably the full scope of your kind of professional life. For me, the next question I want to ask you is about social media and content. But like, is that the right next question, or is there something? Is there other things that we need to talk about before we get to that question?
I think that's a good segue because and it's interesting because I kind of fell into it. So I think that's a good
Okay.
segue. And everything's cyclical. Everything will find itself.
Okay. Cool. Cool. So let's touch on social media then, and content creation and in that kind of world and storytelling and everything like that.
Mhm.
Um, Talk to me a little bit about the moment you realized the maybe the power of social media or started growing interest in what creating content or what content creation, what it can do for marketing or an industry or a business.
I think it was really around 2014 or 2015. Um, I graduated in 2014, and again, like I said, I joined the startup, but I had a little bit of time to kind of like just kick it and chill. And in 2015, my New Year's resolution that year was to take one photo a day. That was it.
Mm,
Didn't matter what it was. Now and so I proceeded to do that for the year. Realized that I was better than I realized at it, and that I actually enjoyed doing it.
mm,
So later that year, I found my dad had a bunch of old kind of cameras because he used to just take photos of us at sports games. He wasn't really that great, but he still had them around, and so I just started borrowing them and using them. And in 2016 or later in 2015, early 2016, I found like a group of photographers in North Carolina who would go out and just like have random shoots. And so I tagged along and I realized like how poor quality the camera that I had was compared to theirs. But the thing that I did love, because I don't know, I love challenges. It's just part of my nature. I still wanted to get the best shot. So I would take my camera and I would try to find angles that they weren't shooting at. I would try to find different ways of shooting through things just to find, again, a different perspective. And I think
mm,
this is the part that really built kind of everything that I do essentially now. Um, because in that time, it wasn't about getting the best shot. It wasn't even getting about a great shot. It was, could I find something that someone else couldn't see, given the same position or given the
mm.
same opportunity? And so later, again, I'm getting better each time, each shoot we're going out. So later in 2016, I buy my own camera, and I'm like, okay, I'm actually pretty good at this. Like, what can I do? I've seen my work with a poor camera. Can I do something interesting with a good camera?
Mm.
And again, it continued to get better and now better quality. Now I'm getting shots that are great, but from different vantage points. People are starting to be like, oh, how did you see that? Or how did you create that? And now I'm realizing that like perspective is what gives you the edge. It's not the tool. It's not like any advantage that you have. It's like, what can you bring to the table that's different than someone else? And I think that was the point that I realized how powerful content was because I was creating it in real time, but also noticing like how interesting and how impactful it could be when you add something that most people aren't seeing or aren't even aware to look for. So, in also another thing that happened in 2015 was I ended up co-starting a social agency.
Mm.
So I was learning more about the creative side of things, and I met someone who had worked in like the ad agency world, and so we kind of partnered together to do more of the social and content aspect of things. And so that's how social and content becomes like a bigger part of my life outside of just the recreational aspect of it.
Got it.
And so in 2015, started this thing. 2016, again, I'm getting better at photography, but also I'm starting to like connect with brands more. And brands are like, oh, we see that you do this. Like, would you mind partnering with us to like shoot, yada yada. So again, every life has kind of been like one incubator or one test, one learning curve to jump into the next, to then jump into the next. And so that's kind of how the pivot and swim went from first job to content to then social to then running an agency, which I co-ran for almost 3 years, right up until when I moved to LA.
Very cool. Very, very cool. So it seems like it's very organic, kind of
Yeah.
like just based on the things you're interested in. And then obviously you went out with your friends and or the group of guys or guys and gals in North Carolina taking photos. Um, and yeah, that curiosity and competitive edge
Mhm.
kind of is something that like you said, if you have that, I think that it's a really interesting personality track that leads to a lot of unique opportunities. It seems like, especially in your case.
Oh yeah.
Um, but I wanted to like just kind of thinking about this 2014, 2015, 2016, social media. I feel like it's in a different place now than it was before. Do you feel that way as well? And maybe you can speak to it's kind of like a little side question, but like maybe you can speak to how the landscape has changed, especially being a part of an agency.
Yeah, it was way more pure back then, right? It
Mm,
wasn't about, I mean, influencers existed, right? But it wasn't what it is now. And it's funny, it's gosh, so much has changed and so much is commercialized and so much is more about hype now. And in 2014, 2015, like I was honestly late to social. I was late to Facebook. I was late to Instagram. I didn't really start using it maybe until 2016, 2015, maybe.
mm,
Um, and it was more about the fun. It was more about the authenticity. Like, what are you doing? What are you actually doing? How do you feel? How do you actually, like, all of the things deeper than what it is now is what it used to be. And I think that's how a lot of social networks start. And one of my favorite movies is The Social Network, about
mm,
the start of Facebook. And a
yeah.
lot of it, is kind of dramatized, but I think there's something interesting about it in terms of like the purity of what they were trying to solve for. And ultimately, all companies, no matter if you're in tech or no matter in social, like reach a fork in the road, right? Where, if like, you've started something that is pure based on good intentions because you want to do something good for your friends or for your community, but then you have to figure out, like, if we want to scale, if we want to be a real business that does things outside of the bubble, what do we have to do? We have to sacrifice that integrity. We have to sacrifice that authenticity to then go and reach bigger audiences and get more money and all these things that you need to survive. So I think that's what social is now, right? Like,
Yeah.
there is no more purity in social. There is no more, like, nobody cares really about anything. They just want to promote, right?
Mm,
So I think for me, that's what it's changed from. It's less about, what people really care about and more about what people want to see. Algorithms drive
everything.
everything.
I want to, I mean, you make a lot of good points there. Do you, and maybe I'm just like pushing back, challenging on this idea. Do
Yeah.
you think that the inevitability of of if you scale something, there's a fork in the road that presents itself, and you have to either choose between authenticity or growth by all means. Is there a way to, I mean, even if I'm a business, if I'm a company, whether it's Facebook or any social media or social network, Google, whatever I am, like it seems like no matter what business I've created or have done, if it's starting to scale, like most people at the end of the day end up scaling it to the point where it just gets to a level where it's unrecognizable. And in fashion, it's a little bit different where uh, brands try to retain the ethos that they started with, but no matter what, it's just inevitable. If you get to a certain threshold, if you breach that threshold, the the brand changes, the business changes, right? Because there's all of these complexities. If you're going to serve 10 million people versus serving 10,000, it just there's a different level of challenge that presents itself. Maybe I'm answering the question myself now too, but do you think there's a way to do it the right way? Do you think there's a way in which a business, a brand, a network, a, a company can scale but not fall into the trap of, you know, making it kind of more about money than anything else?
Yeah, that's a great question, and really quick to play devil's advocate before answering the question. Like, why would it not be okay to change, right? Like, you wouldn't ask the same thing of a human being, like what you know at age 5 versus age 15 versus age 35, all different, and you change as a result of it. So, like, if we think of businesses the same way, it's like, well, a business at age 1 versus age 5, like what they know, what they're capable of is significantly different. So, I mean, to that respect, like, yeah, they can change, and that should be okay. I think what's hard is that when you're a startup company and you're asking for money and you're raising, Series A, Series B, Series C funds, your company isn't your own anymore. That's where it becomes the gray area. Like, you are now a slave to the investor who
Mm,
you've taken their money from, and ultimately they're the ones driving the company. So the only way, I mean, the best way that I personally see, which is a very challenging way, and there are companies that are doing a great job of it. I mean, I'm trying to think of some off the top of my head, but there's one in particular, um, where your investors then have to be like this with your core beliefs. Like if they have to be running right alongside of you, believing
Mm,
the same things with you, because ultimately they're the ones that pull the string.
right.
So if they don't believe the same way as you, they will dictate and demand different things, which will detract you from where you're trying to go, where you have been.
Yeah. Got it. Yeah. Yeah. That what's the company that you were thinking about?
So it's one company that I recently started learning about called Humane, and
Humane.
they're in tech. They were started by a couple Apple executives or Apple employees, and they recently partnered with Coperni in their Fashion Week show this past summer to debut an AI pin that is supposed to kind of bridge the gap between the AI and the physical world. And I think they're doing
Hmm,
some really kind of interesting things with their level of like secrecy and who they've partnered with, and like I don't know, I think they've done an interesting job, and very under
definitely.
the radar as well because not a lot of people know who they are.
Yeah, I didn't know at all, and I'm looking at it right now. There's no way I can make an assessment in 10 seconds
Oh
here,
yeah,
but it's AI pin ahead of its full unveiling. Yeah, this AI
today.
pin, it looks very, very interesting. Looks very, very interesting. Um, cool. Yeah. It's a tough question. It's an interesting question. I also enjoy the movie Social Network. I was just watching a YouTube video about it the other day. Not for I was watching a video about how they did the screenwriting, the
Mm,
screenplaying of it, and like how like the writing is like the first scene of the entire movie where I don't know the name of the actors. I'm not the best with actor names, but the main guy, Zuckerberg guy, the actor, and this
Jesse.
girl are in a bar talking, and like they the whole YouTube video was like 20 minutes breaking down this conversation and
Ooh.
how like they created the ambiance for that scene and how it pulled you in that first scene.
Wait,
um
can you send that to me? That sounds amazing.
yeah, yeah, I got you. I'll send it to you after this. I have to go to my history on YouTube and I'll send that to you. Yeah, man. Okay, cool. Cool. Those are some interesting thoughts that you presented. So you did some agency stuff, social stuff. Obviously, you're big on the world. You've obviously done writing, you continue to write. What are some of like the biggest projects you've worked on? I'm curious to hear some of the moments where you look back and you're like, damn, I did that. Like I'm proud of that.
That's that's an interesting question. I think one, and it's more so a passion project versus like anything that I've done for or with anyone.
I love that.
The reason being because I think, and there's a lot of interesting videos out there. And I love watching like videos from like the 60s, 70s, 80s of like people just like giving like wisdom and advice.
Yeah.
And I can't remember. I recently saw one of like a guy like breaking down like why it's really important to develop yourself versus and your skill set versus like just devote yourself to one specific job, which is what I've done in my career.
Mm,
But the importance of a past project, I think, just helps again build a case study for what you can do, where you're interested in. So for me, in 2022, um, early, I don't know, I try to put together like really interesting New Year's resolutions, things like that I actually will follow through on. And in that year, the resolution was think of yourself at the helm of something and how would you create for them. So if I was an art director or creative director or whatever at a specific brand that I appreciate, how would I collaborate? What would I make? And so that line of thought really kind of started pushing me to develop like interesting concept work. And
mm.
initially, it started out with just like one off, like if I was an art director at Off White and I partnered with NASA, what would we make? I don't know. What would that look like? So I would try to like find again, thinking like more as a marketer, like strategically, like okay, what would a brand actually collaborate and like could they collaborate? Are they in the same world or do they have the same ethos? So all those strategic things was happening, right? And then on the second layer of that was like, okay, creatively, what could we do? I mean, I need to get better at Photoshop then. So that year was about me getting better at Photoshop. How would I make certain things? What designs would I put together? So forth and so on. And so I think that ultimately like started to build a little bit of a case study of like, okay, creatively, like I think I got something here. Like I think things are working. I think I can see and build bridges between brands that like don't exist already that
Mm,
should or could exist. And over time, more and more of these a got me attention from like people at these brands, but also helped push me to one of the bigger projects, which was New Balance Made in Africa, which I'm like super hyped about.
yeah, I saw
Um,
that on your
yeah, it's
website.
like I love. I don't know. I haven't had as much time to work on it now, but I think just a quick synopsis is like me being African, me also being really into fashion and streetwear and sneakers.
Yeah,
You see all of these brands from other brands that are American, major brands that are Asian, major brands that are European, but nothing you really ever see come from Africa, even though Africa is the largest, one of the largest continents, and it could encompass the US and Europe and parts of Asia. It's like, so there has to be things here, right? So
yeah,
New Balance at the time was one of my favorite brands. I had been wearing them quite often. And I was like, is there a world they have a made in USA, they have a made in the UK, they have a Japanese division, which technically is made in USA.
yeah.
Could we do something for Africa? So it was me kind of blending two worlds that I am African. I love New Balance. Blending those two worlds and trying to find different design motifs from the countries in Africa to speak to in some way, give some education around, and put together on sneakers that I appreciated.
Yeah.
Um, and that really kind of blew up on my IG page. Like people really responded well to it because I think there's a need for it. There, people, Africa is a huge country, and people love African design.
Yep.
Um, so anyway, that all of that kind of led me to. I don't know if that answered your initial question, but that for me was a big kind of moment in terms of
For sure. And I would say, I mean, when Toon told me about you, my friend Toon from I was supposed to say from Dutchland, from Amsterdam, from the Netherlands. Sorry, sometimes I make fun of Toon. Just he
he's
makes fun
great.
of America a
Yeah,
lot. So
yeah,
like, yeah,
he
so
does.
sometimes I just make fun of him and just say things about like
Yeah.
Dutchland and like Amsterdam, things like that. So if you're Dutch, take no offense.
Mhm.
But back to what you're saying, when I was talking to Toon, he was like, I know you've seen Charles' work, and I had. I just hadn't even recognized it was you because I'm on my explore page. I see something cool and I'd like it. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
It sometimes doesn't go beyond that, but that is kind of the power of the internet, where the amount of impressions that each person goes through is in the thousands, tens of thousands, right? So like some things that stick or sticky, and you view them and you look at them and they stay with you. And looking back, I definitely remember these concepts for New Balance made in Africa. And when I'm looking at them right now too, like the silhouettes and the models that you've kind of reinterpreted, it's so fun. Like I love the like 990 like back hit of like the continental Africa versus like what it is now with just like the symbols that it has now.
Yep.
I don't know, it's pretty fun, and I can only imagine and hope that these kind of things continue to lead to opportunities that bring themselves into the physical world, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
that's pretty cool, man. That's pretty sweet. And so like I guess we'll kind of dive in deep with this just for a second. How long does it take you to kind of concept one of these ideas of like reconstructing one of these items of footwear, and then kind of bringing into the like like digital workspace, and then actually
Yeah.
posting it? Like how does it go from like thoughts to workspace to being posted on Instagram?
That's a great question. It takes a while, and I'm trying to get better about the length of time, making it longer because I've noticed that like sometimes I'll rush to get things done just to post it, or like I
Mm,
feel like I have this internal clock of like you gotta do this quick, 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 just because that's the world that I work in. But I want to get better about taking the time to research, to really dig into like the meat of, okay, I've got a concept. I want to do something for Egypt. I want to do something for Ghana. Like what is it about that place? What culturally is interesting about them that like that people will actually want to engage with. So it's that
Yeah.
research part that I think takes a while, but also then the colors part of it too. I think I've gotten a lot better with like color and material. That's an interest that I've really developed over like the past year, of understanding colors and how they work together and like all of these different things. So between the research and like the color aesthetic part of it, uh, definitely takes a week or so, from concept to like
Mm.
having something that I'm like kind of jiving with. But I want it to be longer because I feel like some of these ideas deserve a little bit more space and time and thought into them. So
Yeah, nice, man. Has anyone from, I mean, you said that, you've been able to bridge the gap with some different people at these companies. In terms of, I'm a big New Balance guy myself. I've had one of the, he's no longer a new employee. His name is Jordan Johnson. He works on the
yeah,
collaborations and energies team
yeah.
at New Balance. He's a great dude. You know Jordan.
I know we've talked every now and then on social.
Yeah, Jordan's a cool guy.
Yeah.
I know. I think he used to work with like Joe Grondin, and I don't
Hmm.
think there's a lot of things changing.
Yeah.
But have you ever had any kind of more, I guess, serious or runway conversations about some of these concepts with anyone from New Balance in particular, or is it they're kind of interested right now and they would love to kind of maybe explore something, and they should explore something in the future, but like where are those things at? Maybe I'm teasing something out. I don't
No,
know.
no. I wish I actually haven't had. I mean, I people at New Balance know who I am.
Hmm.
That much I can say. In terms of like conversations of like making this real, making it something, it just hasn't gotten there yet.
Yeah.
And I think I haven't. To be fair, I haven't really pushed the envelope. For me, this has always been more of a side project and case study, and I think
Right.
I don't know that it's at the level yet to where I'd feel comfortable like presenting like what this is. I feel like there's definitely something here.
Yeah.
I think it needs more work as to what it could be. Because I mean, obviously, doing a Made in Africa division is like that'd be a huge investment. The infrastructure is
Yeah.
not there. Like
Yeah.
when we're talking business stuff, like now it's a bigger conversation. Um, so I don't know. I think there's more. Like if I want to make it real, that's the next step. Like what would it actually look like outside of Instagram? Like how
Right.
did you make it bigger? Which I just haven't had time to do. But
And totally. I only ask. I don't like. Hopefully, I don't seem like I'm putting pressure on you to do that at
oh,
all. I
no,
think.
no, no.
I think at the same time, um, like when you see something, just like when you watch a movie as a kid, it's science fiction. You see a lightsaber. You see just something, a flying car. You just what you see it and you want it to step into reality, right? Like you just
Yeah,
you want it to be a part of the physical world. You want to see that come to life.
for
There's
sure.
like jetpacks is another example. Like just there's things that you see as a person, and when you see them online, like even concepts that you see online, collaborations like what you're doing, you're like, damn, that would be fire. That would be cool to see. And it would be cool to see a Made in Africa line by New Balance. Jordan, if you're listening, Joe, if you're listening,
Oh, yeah.
man, maybe we'll manifest something here. I have no idea. We
I'm
got a
here
couple
for it.
listeners like that who listen to the
I'm here
podcast.
for
So
it.
Charles, talk to me. We've been talking for a good little bit here. I know I promised you an hour.
Oh, dude, all
We'll
good.
we'll make sure that, I know we are both busy. We got people to attend to, but I wanted to ask you a little bit about the writing side of what you've done as well, because I think you've also been a part of and written for some pretty noteworthy publications, media outlets, whatever you want to call them. Um, Kind of talk us through how that part of your career happened, being able to write about sneakers and about streetwear for Hype Beast, Complex, Port Magazine. Like those are no shrub of names. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think one of the biggest, and hopefully it becomes thematic because I think younger listeners like need to take stock of like proof of concepts are so important. Like whether they're for yourself to just like develop your own personal skills or for people to see what you can do. I think writing again kind of falls into the same bucket. again, I started this the side project in college that got me into more creative writing. Then was doing writing in college for the magazine that was covering startups. But then outside of that, it's like, how do you pivot yourself to be a writer that is desirable enough to work or get words in these publications? It's do free work. Like
Mm,
at Port, I think one of the first things, and I started with Port because first off, what I did was I made a list of interesting places that I would love to write for one day. And so I started with that. And I was like, if I was going to write for anywhere, how would I pivot from writing from startups, writing about startups, to writing about what I actually am enjoying? And so that was step one. Step two was finding editors within those places and understanding what they cared about. So, like, okay, you can send a pitch to anyone at these places, but like, if you don't send it to the right person, it's not going to end up on their website.
right.
So I found them, found email addresses for every single one of them, and I started just like pitching ideas. But I would research like how to pitch ideas. I wouldn't just like send random stuff. So I would craft a really well written email, very detailed description of what I want to do. And Port Magazine was the first to kind of like bid. And ultimately for them, I did a lot of free work, but I did it free because I knew that they were big enough to where I get my name there. Other publications would see, okay, this guy can actually write. He's not just like pitching me something random, because they
Mm,
always want to see fresh work. They want to see what you can do, what you've written about, where you've been, how recent it's been. So all those things kind of helped me. And again, using Port as like free work, but a proof of concept. And a quick note about free work, I feel kind of conflicted sometimes, but free work can sometimes mean that the value of what you're getting is, and I don't want to use the word exposure, it's like, it's an example, right? It's a case study. That's what I was being paid ultimately. And I knew that, and I was okay with that, because that case study ultimately helped me get words into high sobriety,
yeah.
helped me get words into complex. And it's a snowball effect. Once other people see, oh, you've written for so and so, oh, so and so,
Yep.
then they're much more willing to give you a shot into the fold. So all that to say is about research, knowing what you wanted to do, but also accepting that work may not be paid, or work may be a little bit more undervalued than probably you're worth, but
Yeah.
know what value you're getting and be okay with that.
Yeah, for sure. And you have to hustle. It seems like
Yeah.
you hustle too, man. I mean, it just kind of reminds me of, I don't know if you read Bobby Hundred's book, This Is Not a T-shirt.
No, but I've been meaning to get it.
You should read that one. I read it, and there's a story that always stuck out to me, or stood out to me. And I think Bobby even he said this on an interview too, but when he first started the brand, he was screen printing, right? And
Yeah.
he was trying to get into different stores. I can't remember the street, like La Brea. It was in California. I can't remember the street.
Okay.
Forgive me for the names. A very fashion forward place in Los Angeles. I'm just missing it, but it's pretty obvious. I can't remember the name. And he went to store A, and he told that store, store A, like, here are 25 of my shirts. Like, if you go down the street, store B, can't remember the name, yeah, but they know each other. I already have a sold out like showcasing of these shirts in that store. Like, you need these shirts. The guy's like, yeah, whatever, kid, get out of here. Calls up the guy from store A, calls like store B. He's like, I got this guy coming in here talking about how he's got these shirts and they sold out. Little does he know is that in store B, yeah, store B bought his shirts, or they gave him a shot, but he told his friends to
Mhm.
go and buy the shirts from the store. And so he ate the cash, he ate the loss so that he could be inside of a particular store. And it kind of sounds like the same. It's proof of concept, like, right? Like, people want to know that your ideas hold some weight in the world, right? And whether it's obviously Bobby Hundreds, that's kind of faking it so you make it, but like, regardless, he knew what he had was good, right? So like, if he believed in his craft, he believed in what he could do, but at the same time, like, people want to know that you obviously know what you're talking about, what you're doing, and how to present yourself, how to create value to a customer base in the world. And it seems like for these publications that you have written for, like you said, it's a snowball effect, it's a domino effect. If you can get one, you can get five, you can get five, you can get 15. If you can get
Yep.
15, you can get 35, right?
Yeah, for
And
sure.
that's pretty cool. That's pretty
Yeah.
cool. Do you have any other like different writing engagements that you're kind of working towards? Like how does your day look? Like what, like obviously like you have a lot of things that you're doing. You have a professional side too. Like I mean, there's all these things that I feel like you're touching right now. Like how do you manage like all of these interests? That's another question I wanted to ask you.
Um, uh, it's funny, like people ask like what I do for fun, and I don't really do that much. Like that's the sacrifice, right? And I love just like I have so many books about successful brands and like successful people and like what their habits are because I'm a nerd about learning about like what makes people tick and like what makes success
Hmm.
happen. And I think one of the things I've learned is that much like an athlete, you devote your life to something and you have to devote your life singularly to that thing to be great at it. And that means that you have to block out so many other things. Like
Yeah.
for every yes is like a billion no's,
Yeah.
right? And so I think I just I enjoy working. I love, making, I love creating, I love, doing things. And that means as a result that I don't always hang out with friends. I don't always go out to events. Like
Yeah.
I'm usually at home 24/7, which is like okay with me and it wouldn't be okay for a lot of people, but like for me there's just goals, there's certain things that I'm trying to do and I know that my time now is so much more valuable than like just going out to meet so and so. No offense to anyone, it's just like there's just certain things that I want to do, and in order to do them, I have to stay locked in. So my
Yeah.
days are usually filled with this like basically when I get up, I like might eat breakfast, I might not. I usually don't eat breakfast, and I'll just like start working. Like I literally get up,
Yeah.
brush, get ready, whatever, start working, and then I keep working until it's like super late at night. I mean, I'll take
Yeah.
little breaks for like food and stuff, um, but that's the grind. Like, and I'm okay with it. Some people aren't, but that's usually how a day in my life looks like, bouncing from various project to project.
Yeah. The work ethic. It seems like you have a very high level of work ethic. And it's it's interesting because there's a lot of people who would argue and say, work life balance is very important. And I mean, to be honest, guys, if you're listening, I'm not one of those people. I'm someone who also, and it's changed a little bit since moving to New York. Like when I moved to New York, I was like, oh my God, I'm in New York. Like I have to do all these things and I have to go out and do these things. And I did that for like 3 days, 3 or 4 days. And then Tune came, and then I did, entertain a guest, and then you got family coming. I did entertain them, and I realized, damn, I'm doing more of this kind of stuff. No shade on Tune or anybody else, but like I miss the consistent grind.
Hmm.
There's something to it, and um, it's not for everyone. I'm the same way, Charles. I'm the same way. The reason why we haven't had the opportunity to hang out is because honestly, every time that I thought about it, I was like, I probably should get some work done. Or I probably should get to bed at a decent time tonight so I can get up and get some work done.
Yep.
And then I
Yep.
was like, oh, idea, light bulb. I could do two birds, one stone. I could get him
Mhm.
on the podcast. I could learn about his life a little bit, and I can get some work done. Like this is the way I think about things. And some people might say, "Damn, dude, that's kind of sad. Like, don't you have a life?" Or, "Damn, Charles, that's kind of sad. Don't you have a life?" But at the same time, I think for me at least, my answer is like I just have goals that I want to achieve. And I don't think that you can accomplish something without having a certain level of sacrifice. Because
Mhm.
every time I sacrifice my goal for something like an event or a friend or a night out or whatever, I just I have this little bit of like fear of regret that kind of builds up inside of me that I just do not like. Especially as and this is probably unhealthy, compare myself to my peers or looking at, how other people have reached their goals, but I haven't. It kind of irks me when I
Mhm.
know I'm not doing all I can do. Um,
Exactly.
but
Exactly. I think that's funny. I was gonna say something about like the drive to like get stuff done. Like I feel like I think like an engineer in a lot of ways. And one of the ways is like ROI, like return on investment. When every yes, like what is the return on that investment? Like if you're going out to hang out with friends, if you're going out to party or to the club, like yeah, you can do that. Yeah, I can do that. But like at the end of the day, what is the next day going to look like for me? What have I accomplished during that time? And how does that lead me towards like what I'm trying to get to? So the ROI is low, which means that like I probably shouldn't do that. But
Mm,
everything's about perspective. So for some
of
people, want to be
course. Of course. And as someone who's listening is probably getting a little bit upset. Guys, if you want to go out and do those kind of things, please, by all means. There could be a high ROI on that. There could be you network with someone, you meet
happy.
someone. Like right now, my girlfriend, she went to an event with one of friends of ours who also creates content, right? And they at the event, they got done with the event. It's art installation. There's a famous Swiss artist. She's Swiss herself. She wanted to meet her, yada yada yada. My girlfriend does art as well. They're at a Korean restaurant. I just got a text message right now. They're at a Korean restaurant, and Lucy Liu is literally standing right behind them. And I'm like, bro, like you're gonna say something? Like, like what you want to say? Like, you gotta say something. And things like that. Maybe spontaneously happen. You never know, right? So, everyone has to kind of come to the alms house of their own thoughts and be someone who understands what they want with their life. If like Charles and I are just two people. Like maybe we're similar because, and that's why we're friends with Tune, and maybe he's similar too in some ways, or maybe he's not. He's probably like, what is wrong with these Americans?
Right.
Damn
It probably
overworking.
is.
Yeah. But it's it's these are all just concepts and ideas, and it's fascinating to be able to hear yours, Charles. It really is. I want to kind of chop up the pod. We're gonna go through like some like rapid fire questions that
Yeah.
we can kind of conclude with things that are less intense, more fun, just kind of like fun little questions, more personal life questions. So the New York City Marathon just happened, and we talked like a tiny bit about this before. You used to play basketball, or used to
Yeah.
like be like, oh damn, I could maybe make it professionally. Would you ever consider doing the marathon? Are you still in good enough shape to run 26.2 miles?
I would have to get ready. And it's funny, I don't think I've really seriously thought about doing a marathon, but I happen to live like not too far from where the marathon cut through in Long Island City.
Mm,
And so I went out to kind of see what was happening and just the energy, the people. I had a coworker who did the marathon and
mm.
she was pregnant. And I was like, whoa, like
Whoa,
that's amazing.
that's crazy.
Um, so I don't know. I think I would consider it. Am I in good enough shape? I need to get in better shape. I'm not in bad shape, but I would need to get in better shape.
26-mile shape is a different kind of shape. You gotta,
Yeah.
that could hurt. Like,
Yeah, exactly. So maybe.
it's funny. I was, we've met a couple friends here, and like I said, my girlfriend, she's hanging out with them right now, or one of them right now, and we're in a group message, and she sent a TikTok, and the TikTok was like, every year the New York City Marathon comes around, and every New Yorker who's not in the New York City Marathon calls up their friends and says, "Yo, we're doing the New York City Marathon next year," and it's like, it's just like a
Yes.
funny thing that I feel like I kind of get it, like because when I like it's we walked to where it was happening in Central Park and like saw the people and saw the cheering. You're like, damn, like there's a lot of people who are out here just to support, just to like
Mm-hmm.
cheer people
Mm-hmm.
on. And
Yeah.
it's like I feel like if I had that much support, yeah, I could run 26 miles.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh man. I love running. I run pretty much every morning. Not outside. I just run on a treadmill, but
Yeah.
what about basketball, man? What about NBA? I know you saw my story. I got the Hennessy from the
So cool.
NBA chocolate in season tourney.
Uh,
Who's your NBA team? Who you have winning the championship?
man,
NBA team championship.
that's tough. Like I love basketball. I also love soccer. No shade to soccer, football. Um,
Hmm.
but NBA, like it's tough nowadays. I don't really have a team. Growing up in North Carolina, like Charlotte is our team, but they are historically bad, chronically bad, and they will never get better. So I don't really. I more so support players and storylines now.
Yeah.
I think in terms of like who's going to win the championship, like that's tough. There's a lot of good teams in the West. I mean, per usual, but
Yeah.
the West has a lot of good teams. I would love to see Lillard is my favorite player.
All time.
Um, yeah, well, not all time.
Wow.
I mean, he's a favorite player. He's been a favorite player for a while.
Yeah.
Um, so he's definitely top 10 of my all-time favorites.
Okay.
Um, so I would like to see him win one. I don't know that I'm not in love with Milwaukee personally, but I support him a lot. So I think I would like to see him um, get a win for
Get a
sure.
ring.
Or
Yeah.
Embiid. I like Embiid a lot as well.
Embiid is from,
Really.
but where
Oh,
is it?
oh yeah. He is it Cameroon?
Cameroon or
Oh, I should know this.
I can't remember. Let me just look it up. Joel Embiid, Cameroonian. Yep,
Okay.
Cameroonian. Cool. Yeah. That was a big move that happened. Sorry if you don't like sports. We'll talk in basketball here for a second. But that was a big move from Portland to Milwaukee. I feel like I don't think they're gonna win because I think it takes time for chemistry to actually work
Yeah.
and build and things like that. But they have a very talented group of guys, that's for sure. We'll see who pulls it off. I personally think it's gonna be the Nuggets again because I think
Mm,
um that the only thing that would stop the Nuggets is fatigue.
yeah.
But I think chemistry, play style, having I would argue and say Embiid's the best player in the world just by how he plays, not from an eye test, but how he plays, his results. And then Jamal Murray and everybody else is such a dynamic group. And we won last year. So
Yeah, I mean they are the best team, so I can't even argue with that. And
yeah,
it's gonna take a lot to beat them.
for sure. Let's end off with this, man. We talked a lot about kind of the journey of your career, and I hopefully a lot of people see the value in some of the things that we talked about, from being someone who enjoys learning to being a curious person to, even if you don't have a family maybe who is as loving as Charles, finding people who can support you. You talked about the teachers in your life that supported you. Like it's not easy as a young person to necessarily see the value of education, the value of a good teacher when you're young, because there's so many
Mhm.
things you're thinking about, girls and public perception or school perception and looking cool and like all these things. But like hopefully people take something like good from today's episode. It's a great episode. I'm loving that this is going to be probably like the second episode of the season.
Much.
Um okay, final question. What piece of advice would you give to your younger self looking back at the tenure of your career so far?
Oh man, there's a couple of things. I think one of the first ones that jumps out to me is like dig deeper into being a curator. Like, and when I say curator, I think I consider myself a little bit of a curator in terms of like the and something I've learned as a marketer is like there's things that are presented to you. There's things that you're told, things that are displayed to you. But there's so many different storylines, so many different things that are happening underneath, like all that's happening, right? So it's like,
Mm,
what is really happening? What are people really saying? And curate and really take the good from what you're seeing and leave the bad. Like, don't take the bad, don't take what people are saying surface level. Like, there's all these things that are happening, and it's
mm,
hard to decipher when you're young. Like, there's everything is coming at you, and you have like such a short window to like take in everything.
yeah.
So I would say I guess curating selective is probably the better, more accurate word for the time. So be more selective of what you let in, because what you let in will ultimately come out in some way. So I think that would be number one. Number two would be let go of your ego.
Mm,
You know far less than you think that you do.
always.
So those two would be it.
Charles Etoroma Jr. Thank you so much for being on the podcast, sir. I appreciate your time. I'll see you some point, hopefully in the city. Let's get back to work.
Yes, sir. See you on the other side.